Win 20% off Black Friday sale, November 21 through 28th.
Hello valued viewers, I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're doing the buyer's guide for the Mi-24P Hind module in DCS World. The first thing to note is, of course, it's early access at the time of doing this review. The module was released into early access June 2021. It's now November 2021. We're going to split the review into the following categories. 1. Capabilities of the aircraft, weapons, navigation, radios, and so on. 2. Visual effects inside and outside, rated between 1 and 5. These ratings will go towards a final score. You will see the final score for this and the other DCS modules in a sheet linked in this video description. Not just rated by me, but the other GR members that have those modules, so you'll get an unbiased review as possible. 3. Sound effects inside and outside, rated 1 to 5. 4. Interactivity and detail of the cockpit and the systems, rated between 1 and 5. 5. Flight model. Not necessarily how realistic it is, we do expect that obviously, but how immersive it is, how it feels, rated between 1 and 5. 6. Difficulty. How difficult is the module to learn and fly, between 1 and 5, and a final summary. Let's get stuck in with capabilities. Welcome in to the rear seat of the Mi-24P Hind. First of all, multi-crew. We can operate this aircraft in single player either from the rear seat here, which will be the driver or the pilot, or press 2, the operator's position. Either of the crew members can take control and fly the aircraft, as well as operating the various systems that they can from their station. The way it works in single player is that if we, for instance, take this operator's position, then the rear position, the pilot's position, is flown by AI, a guy called Petrovich. If we are in the rear position, then the front position's duties are then taken over by the AI Petrovich. In multiplayer, we can either use a single human in the aircraft again, or you can have 2 humans, and again either can swap control of the aircraft and operate those various systems. Next, let's look at the weapons. A veritable feast of weapons, shall we say. Stations 1 and 6. Air to air. Currently we have 2 times 89 Spiral 2 Attacker. This is a radio guided missile that is controlled from the operator from the front seat. Still to be added to the aircraft will be the R-60 infrared heat-seeking missile. We'll get that later on. Air to ground. Very similar is the air to ground 89. It's just essentially a different warhead, and we can have that in high explosive anti-tank or high explosive. Sturm, an 86, very similar and identical in the way we actually use it to the 89. We can have either standard warhead or an empty rack, and I have no idea why you can carry an empty rack, but for some reason you can. The way these guided missiles work is, if we are flying the aircraft from the rear seat here, then the aiming is done by the front seat, whether that be AI or whether that be a human in the front seat. And whether they are AI or human, we have to work in close cooperation with them. So it's all about teamwork, working with the front seater. And the same is true from the other way around. The guy aiming the missile, the operator, has to work closely with the pilot of the aircraft for the systems to gel together. So that takes a little while to get used to, but it's really good once you know how to use it. Now just bear in mind, using the 86 and the 89 requires a special type of flying. It's designed so that the helicopter will be moving forward through the air to the target as you fire the missile, and then track all the way to the target until the missile hits, because you've got to keep tracking it with the system in the front. Then you can turn the optical system off and you can turn away. Now that has implications. So for instance, KA-50, if you know that, or an Apache that's coming to DCS, those can sit in a hover and fire standoff about probably 4 or 5 miles away. The Hind can't do that. The Hind can't sit in a hover, maybe if you're really, really good, but effectively, a Hind can't sit in a hover and just black tanks from 4 or 5 miles away. You've got to do this effect of moving towards the tank, which is a completely different dynamic. It's much less safe. Also, it will take much longer to take out targets. Now, if you don't care about killing loads and loads of targets in a small amount of time, that's fine, and it's a perfectly effective weapon to use. But just bearing in mind that to keep doing those running system, those runs in, turn around, prepare everything, and then run in again, by the time you've done 2 of those attacks, if you're a good KA-50 pilot or an Apache pilot, then you could have taken out 8+ tanks by then. So that's just something to bear in mind when we're using an 80s optical system, SACLOS, compared to a Hellfire laser-guided Vickers or something like that. It's an important point to mention. Stations 2 and 5. Air to air, we've got the 89 again. Air to ground, we've got the same things again, 86 and 89. Bombs, general purpose, 100 kilo, 250 kilo. RPK, that's a cluster munition with 42 sub-munitions, high explosive anti-tank armor piercing, or high explosive frag anti-personnel, 150 sub-munitions. A fuel tank. Pods, we can have a 30mm grenade launcher, AP-30. Rockets, either a single high caliber S-24 rocket or a pod of high caliber S-13 rockets, or medium caliber pod of 20 rockets with the following 4 warheads, or UB-32 pod with S5KO low caliber rockets. Stations 3 and 4. Bombs, 100, 250, 500 kilo general purpose. A Russian style KMGU-2 munition dispenser. These dispense 96 sub-munitions, high explosive and frag, anti-personnel, or high explosive anti-tank against medium to low armour. And the cluster bombs again, we've got 42 sub-munitions, high explosive anti-tank, 150 sub-munitions, anti-personnel, 268 sub-munitions, high explosive anti-tank, 30 sub-munitions, high explosive anti-tank including heavy armour, or 126 sub-munitions, high explosive frag anti-personnel. Fuel tank, 30mm grenade launcher, or a gun pod featuring 1 12.7mm rotary cannon and 2 7.62mm rotary cannons per pod. That's a real crowd pleaser. Or the same rockets that we saw before. We have an adjustable mixture of chaff and flares, and of course don't forget the twin-barreled 30mm cannon that is attached to the starboard front side of the aircraft, in which we can change the ammo types: combat mix, more tracers, no tracers, high explosive, or armor piercing. I hope you'll agree that is a very well armed helicopter. Next, gun sights. There are 3 gun sights. One for the pilot, the ASP-17. We turn it on. Oh, I've left the Russian writing on, never mind. Turn it on here. I'm not going to go through it now, but it's very similar to the Su-25A gun sight, if not identical. It's not radar, but it is an inertial sight, and it links to one of the sights in the operator seat. So we go through to the operator seat. We have the PKI sight here, which is just like a manual optical sight. We also have this sight here, which allows us to aim our guided munitions, our 89 and our 86. If we open the doors and we press right, left, alt and A, you can see we're actually now looking through the sight. It's currently stowed, but we'd usually be able to push it round, look at a target, track that target, there we go, and then fire the missile. And it is, I would say, not an easy thing to do, but it's very satisfying when you get this right. It's old tech. In fact, if we look from the outside, you can see our guy looking through it there, and it's this unit here. You can see those shutter doors have opened, and you can see this gyro-based optical sight now, allowing us to aim the missile and hop out of the system there. It's very realistically modelled, including the gyro-based element of the system. Next, this aircraft can do sling loading. It can carry various cargoes from a hook under the belly of the aircraft. I'm not going to show you how to do it because I would just embarrass myself, but it is quite a powerful helicopter and has a large lifting capacity. It has a countermeasures suite. As you can see there, starboard and port. Like most things, it can be controlled from the operator's chair here. Here's the actual set here. It can also be controlled by the pilot through the operator. Currently, we communicate with the AI member via text. So, for instance, you can see I've just said turning on weapons, weapons ready. In fact, that was the AI in the front seat telling me that he's turning on the weapons and weapons are ready. It's a bit clunky and a bit nasty to look at, obviously, not very professional. I've been assured it will be replaced by voice acting later on in the service of the module. Troop transport. This is, as well as an attack helicopter, a troop transporter with loads of room in the back for troops. Currently, November 2021, it cannot carry troops. We believe in the future it will actually be able to carry troops to the battlefield. Navigation. Primary methods of navigation. First, we've got an ARC-15 automatic direction finding set here. Twin channel for twin beacons. We've got 1 and 2 there, and that's used pretty much like any ARC-15 set in any of the earlier ration equipment. We've got a Doppler-based hover system here. This tells you when you're hovering whether you're going backwards, left, right or forwards, or a combination of all four over the ground. We've got what I would describe as our primary Doppler-based system here, ground Doppler. We essentially set a destination point using this, and this tells us exactly where to fly and if we are drifting from our chosen course. And finally, and possibly the best navigation thing I've ever seen, this is called a moving map. It is ground Doppler based also, and if I were to take off and move over this map, this guy here, crosshair, would actually follow where I was going, and we could see where we were moving over the map. And this is not digital in any way. I mean, this is like a 1982's helicopter. So physically the way it works is this is a map that the guy puts in, and you can take the map out and put another map in if you go into another terrain. And then the Doppler system moves this mechanical crosshair system over the map as you move. It's not super accurate, but it's enough to navigate about with VFR. And it's just like the aiming system for the guided missiles. It's just satisfying and fun when you learn how to do it. In terms of accuracy, obviously, it will never compete with a proper, an INS GPS system. Regards to communication, the radios are comprehensive, to say the least. Primary ones I'll describe as the R863 here, channel selector. We've got a Jadro here covering different frequencies. We've got a mixer here that can choose between the different radios that we're using. We've got a backup 853 here, 852, sorry. We've got an 828, and as well to accompany the ARC 15 that we saw earlier, we've got a U2 down here. So a good comprehensive suite of radios that you can use. And finally, the AFCS/autopilot system. We've got 4 channels that we can ask for assistance with via the AFCS. Heading, roll, pitch and altitude. You can just turn the channel on or turn the channel off, a bit like the KA-50 if you've flown that helicopter before. The basic standard is to have these channels on and these channels off, but you can choose whatever you want. You've also got a selection here if you want the helicopter or the AFCS to help you with hovering and route following, and you can also set routes and have the helicopter fly you on that particular route. Again, well programmed and comprehensive. And that I would describe as the full suite, at least of the moment, of capabilities we've got in the Mi-24P Hind. Next, on to visual effects. We'll do inside the cockpit first, and then we'll do outside. And I should say RC I've got with us here today. Say hello, RC.
Hello.
We're going to rate this between 1 and 5. We're going to start in the cockpit, and I'm going to start in the rear cockpit. Now this one for me is an easy one, because this for me is, as soon as I saw it, the best cockpit for me by far that's been in DCS, in terms of mesh, in terms of the way the sun and shadows react on it, and in terms of the textures. It's the best they've done so far. So absolute kudos for whichever guys it was behind the scenes that were for putting this together. The colours they've used, the intensity. Some cockpits for me are just too dark. I know you can turn your graphics up and turn your graphics down, but you shouldn't have to do that. I've paid my money. I just want it to look right as it is, and this is perfect for intensity, perfect for luminosity, perfect for shadows, whatever a fancy word for that is, and perfect for the textures and the shading and the roughness where it needs to be rough. It doesn't break up when you zoom in like that. I'm on 2K and it's not breaking up. It's basically, for me, by far the best interior of any aircraft in DCS World. There are some good aircraft in DCS World, so I hope you'll agree that this is pretty top notch. What I'll do is stop chatting and just try and show you panel by panel. That's the best thing I can do. Anything you want to mention on the subject, RC?
No, I agree with you. It's a great...
Yeah, it is. I love flying it just for the cockpit, I must admit. And it shows how, if you go and jump in, I like, almost all the planes in DCS, but if you go and jump in, like an old, F5 or a Sabre or something like that was built nearly 10 years ago in DCS, it's aged as it would do. The graphics just aren't there anymore, and you lose your immersiveness, if that's the word. And then you come back in here and it's like, oh, this is, top notch. Look at the way the sun, shines off that Bakelite or whatever it is. It's just absolutely beautiful. This is one that we can sit and look at a lot of stuff for quite a long time. valued viewers. Okay, same news in the front cockpit. Basically perfection. Look at how it shines off that little thing, off that bit of glass. Someone's had to sit there and figure all that out, and you know, it's just. Now, I used to do a little bit of 3D modelling. It was a long time ago with DirectX 3 or something, you know, like well over 20 years ago. Well over 20 years ago. So I know the basics, but yeah, they've got this really good. In fact, we called it Direct 3D back then. I don't know if they still separate it like that. You'd have DirectX would do the 2D, and you'd have Direct 3D would do the 3D. I think they put it all under the same umbrella now. Look at that. Why did they choose the P model to model rather than the one with the fancy gun at the front? The one at the fancy gun at the front is the one that everyone remembers because they, you know, it's in the movies and stuff like that. But this is apparently just the best one overall for A, that they can get access to, and B, for actual using it, for actually blowing stuff up. This is the one you want. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so we've looked around the whole cockpit there. You can kind of see into the rear cockpit there if you look through there. That is basically perfection. The Russians have done a good job with that. I'm chuffed with that. Let's go and have a look outside. Outside, it starts to lose it a little bit for me. I literally make a living from filming the outside of these aeroplanes. You know, I make videos of these aeroplanes, and so I get a very good feel, although I don't know the intricacies of how to make these models, I get a very good feel of what works well for the camera and what doesn't. For instance, I struggle a bit with the new Mosquito that's come out, and this aircraft here I struggle a bit. The way, caught it beautifully in the sun here, but compared to some aircraft like a P-47, which handles the sun beautifully, this I find a bit dull. I think it's got better. As you can see, you've got some nice reflections coming off the canopies here, but I still do struggle to really make it pop out of the screen. I have to do a lot of work in Photoshop to make it really come out at you, whereas an F-16, a P-47, Tomcat, the work's all done for me. So it's just one tiny thing. That's not to say it's bad, it just hasn't got the absolute, you know, perfect 5 out of 5. Now, in terms of the model otherwise, let's have a good look round again. It's the best thing to do. In terms of the mesh, it's pretty spot on. Yeah, you couldn't really want a better mesh. I mean, the textures are spot on as well. The only thing that doesn't quite work for me is the luminosity, or the shininess isn't quite there for me, but that said, the more I look, the more I realise how good it is. We've got very little breakup of the textures there, which is impressive. What are your thoughts on the outside, RC? The more I look, the more I like it.
No, the outside is really good.
Yeah.
Very few errors on the outside.
Yeah. Maybe they've changed it since I last looked.
There have been a few updates.
Yeah. I think you'd agree that's looking pretty top-notch, value viewers. There's little pins. Look at the detail in here. Negative tyres do not wear down. They do pop though. I'm going to quickly go and grab, put it next to something else, just to compare it to something else. A P47, because I rate that really highly, the way it works with the light. Look, when I pan around the camera, look at the reflective surfaces. They're really popping out at you, really making it really stand out. Possibly more than it would in real life, but in a good way, you know. It makes it easy for me to do my job. Yeah, I think either I've just been dreaming, which is very possible, or they've improved it. It could be either way. Maybe I've just got it wrong. I think I can't find any errors in it. I'll take it back. I can't find any errors in it. The detail on the exterior is second to none. Every nut and bolt and rivet is there, and it's reflecting the light well. That's it. It's simple. It's an easy 5 on the outside, and if I could give it more than 5 on the inside, I would. I'd give it a 6, but I'm not allowed to. It's against the rules. So it's a clear 5 on visuals. I'll see you.
I would give it a 5 as well.
Next, sound effects inside and out. Things we're going to be specifically looking for to make sure it's a full, rich sound engine are obviously the overall sound effects of the rotor and the engines. We're going to want to see if we can hear ground rumble. So this aircraft will quite often take off almost like an aeroplane going down the runway on its wheels. I want to hear the interaction with the wheels and the runway, the ground rumble as they call it. I want to hear the engine load. If the engines are getting highly loaded, you know, I don't really know much about helicopters, as you know, but if you get too much torque on the engine, you can hear that engine start to struggle. I need to be able to hear that, like you would in real life, I suppose. Exterior sounds, the flybys, the sound levels, and the overall sound mix. And of course, you've got weapons. I want to be able to hear them and hear them well. The first thing I'm going to do is set my new rudder pedals up, and I'm going to turn the sounds nice and high. And let's take it for a spin, RC. Regards the graphics at the top left and the top right, you can turn them. I've actually forgotten how to turn them off now, but they're just helpers, and you can turn them off easily with a control binding. I just like to leave them on. So let's have a little roll down this runway, shall we? Question from the valued viewers: does the suspension compress with loadout? Yes, it does, and I will try and show you that if I remember. I personally couldn't hear any ground interaction, RC. Can you try it and make sure I'm not dreaming? It may be me dreaming again. Okay, RC.
I'm hearing a rumble, but it's it sounds like air going by instead of actual wheels.
Yeah, I couldn't. And when I lifted off, I couldn't hear any difference in the sound.
Right, exactly.
Right, so we've got a bit of wind there, but we don't have any ground rumble, which is, I must admit, a disappointment. I never noticed that before. Again, remember, the real pilot feels the ground through his backside. We can't do that because we're just ones and zeros. The sound model has to tell us that we're on the ground by giving us a bit of a ground rumble. Even if you have to lose a tiny bit of realism there, it's something you have to give feedback to the virtual pilot. But okay, let's carry on. Let's get flying straight and level and get some exterior sounds and some wind noise in the hair as we increase our speed, because I want to hear how fast I'm going, not by looking at the speedo, but by the amount of wind noise that's going on. Yep, I can hear the wind noise. Lovely meaty sound, no doubt, knowing ED, sample from the real chopper. Okay, we've got a decent bassy set of sounds. The flyby is good, deep, and you can hear a bit of the turbine whine in there as well, which is nice. The wind noise in the cockpit, I can hear it. It's not super loud, but it's just about right, to be honest. So why don't we try and put it through some harsh maneuvers, try and get the engine struggling. And again, I want the sound engine to tell to me through the sound, not just the vibrations in here, which we'll talk about later, but I want the sound to tell me that the engine's going to be struggling. So there you go. Again, I don't know what those sounds are and what they mean, but I know by the choppiness that's come in, I know by the change in the whine of the engine, that the helicopter's a bit unhappy about what it's doing at the moment. And that's what I need to know as an amateur virtual pilot. I can tell that she's not quite settled. Okay. That's just one of the warnings that's in here. And again, when the helicopter's settled, the engine winds back down to normal, the rotor blades sound a bit normal. Let's go and do that again. I apologise, I think I'm about to get in VRS, which we'll talk about a bit later, but let's see if we can avoid it. And we can't, and we're dead! Oh, that was unprofessional. Right, let's try that again. Embarrassing for me. Right, I'll see, don't worry, I'll cut that out. Let's get going. That's actually a great example there. I think I'm heavy. I think I'm full fueled at the moment. Yes, I am. And I went straight onto the collective there, just do a kind of vertical takeoff. And you hear the turbines kind of wheezing now. Did you hear them? And I think I may even cause a problem. I think I'm about to cause a problem with it. But listen to that. Back off the collective. Turbines are speeding up. Whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh! Well, we're going to talk about the difficulty in a bit, RC. Look, by my terrible skill, I've just shown you what it sounds like when you're damaged. The rotor's off balance, the whole thing is shaking left and right. Listen to the sounds, telling me that I've screwed up. Let's do it again. Yeah, I'm trying to fly with absolutely full fuel here at the moment, which is a bad idea. Means I'm going to have to do a running takeoff, I think. One thing about helicopters, one thing I've learned over my years of DCS is how I've put a full fuel load in a jet, and it does make a difference, but, you know, it still operates pretty much the same. Put a full fuel load in a helicopter, you have to fly it differently. You have to take off differently, do everything differently. It's hashtag first time with new pedals, by the way. So, like we were saying earlier, it's perfectly normal for a heavily loaded Hind to do this kind of takeoff. Up he goes. The faster we're moving forward through the air, the more lift we can get under the rotors. Right, I'm going to try and show the chopper off again without smashing it to pieces this time. Listen. Again, I don't really know what their sounds mean, but I know that the helicopter's unhappy and stressed when they're happening. Same thing. Oh, I'm pushing my luck here. I'm pushing my luck here. Look at this. Oh. I pushed my rudder pedal so hard, I pushed my seat back, and I'm no longer really connected to the rudder pedals. There we go. Seat forward. Right, there we go. I think I've actually damaged the chopper again. There you go. No, we're back in control. Some things we've learnt there. Yes, I can hear when the rotors are under stress, when the engine's under stress, and we can hear when we've got some damage in there and it's shaking us about. So that's good.
You can also hear when you're auto-rotating, the rotors speed up.
Oh, really? Like when you're taking the collective off, yeah? When you're taking the
yeah,
load off
when
them.
you're going, yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to show an auto-rotation because I'll just make an even bigger fool of myself. But yep, I'll take your word for that. Why don't we try and use some weapons? I am going to show you how to do some weapons real quick. I'm going to press a button which tells the AI in the front to turn on the weapon systems in the front. Then I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to turn my sight on. Turn my master arm on. I'm going to tell him to fire some rockets. I've got some rockets here, as you can see. Look how the whole aeroplane judders when I fire them. Look at the suspension moving. Okay, load of sound feedback there. That's why don't we fire our gun if I can remember how to. I think it's that one. Ba ba ba. Again, look at the suspension, the chassis move. Not good enough for you? Let's turn the feed rate up, shall we? Watch this. I mean, that's not pretty cool. We could go through all the weapons. The sounds are all there. Everything you need is there in terms of sound effects, so that's good. I've been reliably informed not to forget to tell you that the fan goes on, although it doesn't make any sound, and the wipers go on, although they don't make any sound. We have to do the awkward thing of giving it a rating out of 1 to 5 now, 1 being bad, 5 being good. I would say, I mean, all the sounds that are there are good. They are in a good mix. I think it's missing ground rumble, which I think it needs. I'm trying to think bad things. I'm trying to find bad things. I can't really think of bad things. Obviously, the AI's voice isn't there yet, but it's going to be coming. So I'd say it's almost there. Missing 1, maybe a couple of things. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 overall for the sound. RC?
I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 because I think the only thing I can see that's missing is the ground rumble right now.
Welcome back, valued viewers. We're just going over the sounds again, and it's got that sound of the tyres hitting it's got the sound of the tyres hitting the ground, but I still couldn't get any ground rumble. I'm going to go up to 4.5 as well, like RC, because it has got tyres hitting and touching the tarmac, just not when it's rumbling along. Next, interactivity and detail. How many of the controls and stuff can we press, can we interact with, and the systems behind them modelled to some degree. So a 1 would be an FC3 plane, like an F-15 or an Su-27. There is basically almost no interactivity with the cockpit. A 5 would be an A10C, where the module's been out for well over 10 years, and just about every button is modelled and the systems behind them. So the Hind, it's going to score very well. There's so many buttons, we can't go through them all, but circuit breakers, if you want to call them that, master switches, probably circuit breakers we'll call them. Everything's working there. All these guys along here, radio, it's called radio navigation, but it's a lot of other stuff as well. I think everything's modelled there. Lights, everything's modelled there. Flares, still modelled. Radios, I think they're all modelled apart from 1. I think U2 and ARC-15's in there. All the APU and the engine start stuff's in there. I can't even remember what this guy is. IFF is not more... Wow, I don't want to say it's not because I'm not sure. We'll have to come back to that one. I can't remember with IFF. All this stuff is engine stuff, fire extinguishing stuff to an extent at least. There. Primary radio, navigation, second radio, mixed radio. This guy here, I haven't actually figured out what that is yet, so I don't know. Cabin pressurization, yes. Hydraulic systems, yes. AFCS, I know it's not complete at this moment, but it's, you know, it's all going to be there. It's pretty much there. Indicators, gear, yes. All of the indicators are, or the instruments, sorry, are in there and working with their various fidelity behind the scenes working. Caution warning lights, I haven't looked into it, but I'd be amazed if they're not all working and modelled in there. These gyros are modelled because you have to reset them. ASB gun sight, just about everything's there. Turn all the knobs and do all the things. We've got proper videos and all of this obviously, but I can't remember it now. Clock, ADIs, engines, instruments, temperatures, whatnot, everything's in there. The weapons, armament panel, everything I think is in there modelled. This stuff I haven't even played with yet. It's similar or the same as the Mi-8, but I know it's all modelled. This is all modelled. Fueling is modelled, the tanks and whatnot. RWR is modelled. Engine parameters modelled. Gun counters modelled. First aid box not modelled, but I guess that would be for Armour 3 and not for DCS. Lighting rheostats all modelled. All this stuff is like electrics. So you've got DC power here, AC power there, various voltmeters and gauges and miscellaneous stuff. Some of the environmental stuff won't be modelled obviously because we're a virtual man, but everything that can be just about is. These guys here are all modelled. You can open the doors and stuff like that. We can somewhere. There we go. These are not modelled. Circuit breakers, I guess they should be to be absolutely full fidelity. And you'll be able to pop the circuit breakers out and stuff like that. I suppose that's a bit loud. Fan, E2B, stuff there. Temperature here. Is there anything that's not?
I think the handle above you isn't modelled.
Oh, how? No, look at that. It's not modelled. Oh dear. How will I get out in my virtual airplane? There you go. Whoa. That goes against the fidelity score, I see. I mean, you're looking around. It's modelled. That's just been implemented and modelled. That works. All of that stuff works. That works. This works. I think all of that stuff works. All this works. Yes, this all works. I still haven't figured all this out, but the stuff you need to know...
Some of that is modeled, but it's modeled in terms of switches, but it doesn't actually do anything.
You wouldn't mark it down for that because the things that aren't modeled aren't in DCS, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. This guy's all here. This guy's all here. This guy again, there's a whole load we don't even know what it is. I should say, at the time of making this, there's a very insufficient flight manual. You would agree with that, wouldn't you, RC? At the time, in early access. Yeah. So there's not a big... You need a big 300 or 400 page manual for something this complicated. There's like an 80-page manual, which gives you sort of some of the basics. But, you know, if I want to know what that switch there does, there's nothing in the world anywhere to tell me what it is at the moment in early access. I guess they'll address that at some point, but just bear that in mind. So most of this I don't know what it does, and they couldn't tell you. But, I mean, the bits that we need are there. That's the best I can give you at the moment. Don't even know what that is, but that's not modelled, whatever it is. Can't think what else to look at, RC.
I think that's it for the back.
How come we can't open the front cockpit then? I must admit I've never tried, but
you can.
Oh. Oh, there we go. Look at that. There we go. Right. I don't even. Oh, you know what that does? That pops the window out. Probably I'll see on the right. Probably pops the window out.
Yeah, and there's another one on the front, the back cockpit.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there. This guy's just been implemented. I can't even remember what it. Oh, these are timers for putting bombs on. For bombing, I've already forgotten. You know, there's so much you can't remember all this stuff. Tested it and it all worked. I know there's some little missing bits there, but I think it would be crude of you not to give it a 5 out of 5 after knowing how much work has gone into the background of this and it's still going into it, still going in. I don't know. What's your thoughts? It's tough.
I would agree. I mean, it's a heck of a lot of work. I think that a lot of that weapons stuff is modeled, but it's just not explained.
Yeah.
Yet.
So like we're talking a lot here. There's none of this in the user manual, so we don't know what half of this. You can click all these buttons, but we don't know what it does, or even if it's relevant to this model of Hind. Who knows? Who knows? No, we certainly don't at the moment. So we can't give you some of this information, unfortunately. I reserve the right to change my mind at any point because that's the whole point of this. You know, if I find out new information. But I think, being that it is so detailed behind the scenes, I think I've got to give it an A10C style 5 out of 5. What do you think, RC?
Yeah, I'll give it a 5 out of 5 for interactivity.
Next, we're going to look at the flight model. Now, I'm not looking as such about the realism of the flight model for two reasons. One, I trust that they have done it realistic. They have a precedent of making realistic modules. And two, I couldn't tell you if it was realistic anyway because I've never flown an Mi-24 or any helicopter. What I'm really looking for is it an immersive feeling flight model? Can it fool myself and RC, who, like us or not, we're both experienced virtual pilots, into thinking that we are flying what we think the Mi-24 should feel like? It's a big, heavy, powerful and fast helicopter. Will it feel like that? Or will it feel skittish? Will it feel silly in some way? Let's go and find out. The way it's going to translate the feel to me is through, first of all, how the helicopter moves through the air. Secondly, how the sound engine is going to work with the flight model to tell me when the helicopter is unhappy, like the rotors aren't working optimally, for instance, or the engine is under too much stress. And third, cockpit shake. Cockpit shake's really important and underrated. Now, remember, cockpit shake you can adjust in the main options for the helicopter. You can turn it up or turn it all the way off or in between. But the cockpit shake will tell me, again, what the helicopter is doing. Are we on the edge of VRS? Are we at the limits of the speed? And so on. So let's go and get a good feel. Now, again, this is something that you're going to have to kind of trust me on. Oops, let's not tip it over. Let's try and fly properly or relatively decently this time without crashing. Note the instability of the aircraft on the ground. Now, this is probably realistic, you imagine. Look how high rotor, which is, if you like, pulling the helicopter up, is. And look how tall the helicopter is, how thin the wheels are. One thing you'll notice is it will rock about almost like a spinning top on the ground very easily. And you need to maintain good control and good trim on the ground. Just part of the difficulty of flying it. You see the fan shaking just a little bit, just normal flight. You can see a little bit of dash shake. Put my gear up, probably doesn't help. You can hear the wind noise. The wind is all part of the flight model. That wind noise is increasing now as I get faster. 200 kilometers an hour. When I'm turning like this, when I'm banking and turning, does it feel like I've got lots of weight, lots of inertia, lots of those other physical properties? Yes, it does. I don't know how to convey that to you. You just have to trust me that it feels like I'm, welling around 10 tons of aluminium at the moment. Look, if I stamp on the rudder or the anti-torque pedals, listen to those rotors. The way it spins, the way, not just that it spins, but the way that it stops spinning. So what I would describe as a kind of rotational momentum of the aircraft, all giving me that feeling of weight. And it's something that ED are really good at with their helicopters. Let's go and do a vertical maneuver. Make sure I don't get in VRS. VRS is where, I guess it's the equivalent of a helicopter stalling a wing. If you were an aeroplane, you could stall a wing. VRS is, I guess, kind of similar to that in a way. But for helicopters, that's something that's heavily modelled, and you have to be very careful when driving, when flying a helicopter in DCS. Listen to the wind noise again, all that noise, aerodynamic noise increasing. Listen to that. And I'm feeling all of that. I'm feeling it losing lift now. It's kind of swinging round. Everything feels good there. Note that I've got the helicopter in a very light configuration at the moment. I've got minimum fuel, no stalls, so I can do these kind of crazy maneuvers. Wouldn't want to do this if I was full of fuel. Probably snap the rotors off. Look at that, absolutely stopped on a dime. Really cool stuff. One thing I want to look at more is the cockpit and how it shakes when I'm pulling those harsh maneuvers. Let's try that again. So look at the shake that we've got in the cockpit at the moment. Let's see what it's like when we really yank aft on the stick. Upset the rotors a bit. Let's get some speed in first. I don't really see. Ooh, too far. I didn't really see much change in the way that we get cockpit shake through the violent maneuvers. Can you go and check that yourself, RC?
I was doing it too, and you're right.
Yeah, that's a disappointment. I must admit, I haven't noticed that before. I'm not really sure how much a cockpit would vibrate in a real Mi-24 when you were doing these type of maneuvers. But really, as a virtual pilot, the stresses on the airframe and the rotor system have to be conveyed to me through the sound engine, as it is at the moment, and also through the vibration of the whole system. I need to feel that. I can't feel it in my butt like, whoa, hello, like a real Mi-24 pilot does. And I really need that conveyed to me by the whole cockpit, jigga, 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 kind of shaking around, letting me know that the helicopter's upset, and this is going to happen, right? I'm going to crash. So that is something that for me is lacking. I guess I'm dead now, but let me see if I can... Yeah, my tail fell off. There you go, damage model, works. So if I were to summarise it, I would say the feel is good as it is with the Huey and as it is with the Mi-8. Everything's there in terms of feel, in terms of how the helicopter reacts. In terms of the sound engine for the flight model, I'd say it's just about good enough. I would actually prefer it to be a bit more intense, a bit more sound when it's a bit upset, but it is there. The cockpit vibration for me isn't really there. I would really like to see that cockpit within reason, bearing in mind that you can adjust it up and down. I've just got it on the average setting at the moment. I really want to see it jumping up and down, again, telling me, I'm upset, you've got to ease off for that anti-torque pedal, or you've got to, do whatever, or you're going to crash. So that's something I would like to see change a little bit, and I think, in my view, is lacking. Otherwise, anything you'd like to add to the flight model and how it feels to you, RC?
No, I would agree with you on the feedback stuff, but it does fly well.
Yeah.
And controllable, and it fails when it should fail. So
yeah. Oh, that's another thing to mention. You can make it, you can damage your own aircraft by the way you fly, and I don't just mean crashing into the ground, but you can fail. You can over torque the engines. You can even lose bits of your aircraft if you're pulling too high. So overall, RC, I'm going to give it a 4 because the feel is there. It's top notch. It certainly is immersive in that it makes me feel like I'm in a big, heavy helicopter. fast helicopter, plenty of wind noise, some good audio feedback. I think we're missing some cockpit shake that should be in there when it's upset. Otherwise we'll give it a 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Yourself?
I'm going to give it the same for the same reasons. It's good, but it's not a 5.
Welcome back. Next is difficulty, rated 1 to 5. 1 is an FC3 plane, like an F-15 or an Su-27. It's super easy, a child can do it. 5 would be an A-10C, where the learning the systems is really, really, really hard and takes tens of hours of study, watching videos, reading manuals and stuff like that. So I'd like to split this into 2. 1 is the systems, learning the systems, weapons and stuff. The second half is the actual flying, operating it. I would say the systems, it really depends how you want to fly it. That's the slightly difficult thing about this to rate. Assuming the majority of you out there are going to fly from the rear seat like this, with most of the weapons being set up and controlled by an AI guy in the operator's seat. That's the majority of you are going to work on that basis there. That makes the systems pretty simple. It means countermeasures, it becomes super simple. It means setting up the weapons, especially the operation of the guided weapons. It makes them super simple. Literally, all you've got to do is get the right switches here and the ASP17 and here, the right configuration, and then you operate the AI guy, through this little AI menu that you can see, this little guy here moving about. And it's really as simple as, I want to shoot that thing there, press the button for shoot, or aim at least in that direction there. And that's pretty much all there is. Because the work, most of the stuff's been pressed by that guy out the front there, which is an AI guy in the majority of your cases. So I'm going to go with the kind of majority cases there. If you want to go and fire rockets and guns and bombs and stuff like that, it's pretty simple. You know, there's not a great deal to learn. You get the switches in the right order on the armament panel. You get the gun sight in the right order, which is almost the same way as we do it for all of the weapons. You kind of put the crosshair on the other crosshair, put that on the target, run in at the right speed, and you can fire it. It requires skill, but it's not super complicated. There's not massive amount of reading you need to do. Like I said, you can just about do most things from reading the manual, which at the moment is just like an 80-page manual, you know. It's just like a tiny little booklet. So that shows the way that we operate it in DCS most of the time is very simple. Most of these gauges and instruments, don't be put off by too much. Most of them I've never even looked at. I look at the speedo, I look at the got a rad out here, I look at that guy for hovering. I don't even look at the altimeter because I never go more than about 50 feet above the ground anyway. That's about all I use, to be honest. I don't even use the VSI. I just don't find you really have to generally. And I have a perfectly good time flying it. ADI maybe. So systems I find pretty easy. I'm going to rate them 3 out of 5. You know, somewhere in the middle. Not super easy, but certainly not difficult. Flying the chopper is going to be a bit more difficult. It's not a game. You can't just get in it and whack the throttle to maximum or whack the collective to maximum. Well, I'll show you what happens. Okay, it's a game. Ooh, fell off the rudder pedals again. Collective up. I mean, it's not going to be too long now before I burn the engine out. I'm in a spin. I can't get out of it even with full rudder, right? You know, what I'm saying there, you've got to understand how a helicopter roughly works. Like, I'm no helicopter pilot, as you all know by now, but I know the basics of flying a helicopter, and you've got to know those basics. Like flying a warbird, you can't just jump in and push forward and it goes forward. You've got to learn and understand how the dynamics of a warbird works, and in this case, how the dynamics of a helicopter works before you can actually have any fun with it. So you've got to have that level of understanding. On top of that, in terms of the spectrum of helicopters in DCS, I would say it's not an easy helicopter to fly. I would say it's halfway between a Huey, which is, I guess, average hardness, and a HIP, Mi-8, which is hard. As hard as it gets, basically. It's halfway in between. So if we've got the Huey, I think a 3 I rated it. You got the HIP, about 5 I rated it. This would probably be a 4. It's certainly not a starter helicopter. I wouldn't recommend it as a starter helicopter. I always recommend a starting helicopter as a Huey because it's not overbearing, it's not overpriced, it handles really well, it's forgiving as long as you learn the basics of helicopter flight and you understand how to manage your engines, which you'll need to do in here as well, by the way. Then the Huey's it becomes really easy. This never really becomes really easy. You saw me mess up back there. I got into something called VRS, vortex ring state. It's a problem with all helicopters, especially a big heavy helicopter like this. You've got to understand the basics of VRS, otherwise you'll just crash every time and you'll very soon get bored and go and play War Thunder, and no one wants that. So this is why I'm saying it now, so you understand that. So summary, don't make it your first helicopter. I don't think you'll enjoy it. Go to the Huey, learn that, get it cheaply on sale, then come and get the Hind, and then I promise you'll love the Hind for its capabilities. In terms of capabilities, I should say it's really got nothing on the KA-50. The KA-50, if you want to sit and take out a whole platoon of tanks, take the KA-50 every day. This will not take out a whole platoon of tanks. It will take out maybe, I think, 6 RC? 4? No, 8. 8 if you're a really good pilot in it. Or if you're like me, you'll take out 2 and then get shot down. As an average pilot, so it does take a lot of skill. That's not saying it's bad in any way, but just don't expect to destroy the earth in it if you're an average skill pilot. So difficulty overall between 3 and 4, like I said, I would have to say 3.5 overall. URC, while I have a bit of fly around.
Systems in operation, I would say, is like a 3 out of 5. Like you gave it, pretty easy to operate once you know how to do it. It's not very intuitive.
No, I agree.
But once you know how to work it, it's easy. Petrovich makes it easier, but still it's not hard. In terms of flying it, it's not that difficult.
You're a better helicopter pilot than me. I won't deny that.
Yeah, I give it a 3 out of 5 for flying it. It's really not that hard once you get the hang of it.
Roger. And just so you give you a rough aspect. Sorry, I'll let you talk in a second. While I'm flying, I haven't flown this for about 3 months or so because my rudder pedals will be broken, and so I'm coming in as a kind of average pilot. Hasn't flown it for 3 months, and I've worked all the systems, no problem. I am struggling with the flight, but obviously I'll need lots of practice. Please carry on.
That's about it. I was gonna say it's not. It's definitely harder to fly than, like you said, the Huey, but easier than the Hip in controllability. So
Roger. I also found it, just as a point, I find it really unstable on the ground. Like it just wants to topple over. Do you find that, or is that just me?
Yeah, it does.
I'm going to try and show you now.
It's important when you have it on the ground to trim it right.
Right. Again, it's just...
Otherwise,
I mean, and it is a tall, skinny helicopter, so the real one's probably like that. Relatively small wheelbase for its size, and it topples over all the time for me. Again, it's completely my fault. I just struggle to fly. I'm just not very good. But it's just one thing to bear in mind. It can get a little bit frustrating. Sorry, and what was your final overall score for difficulty, RC?
Final overall, I'd say 3 out of 5 for difficult.
3 out of 5, Roger. Which leads us to our summary. I apologise it's not been the most professional of videos, but it's been honest, and I think we've covered some good points in there as well. Capabilities, good set of capabilities for a 1980s helicopter, very analogue, no digital. Again, don't expect to wipe a whole platoon of stuff out if you're the average kind of skilled pilot. Nav it's okay, it's not amazing, but it'll get you from A to B, and it's easy to use. Communications, again, once you understand the systems, they're pretty easy to remember. Visual effects, about as good as any module in DCS at the moment. Sound, for me, missing a couple of things, but overall the mix is good, and everything else is, well, top notch really. I don't know what else I would want. Interactivity and detail, there's a couple of tiny bits missing as we saw, but I still gave it a 5 out of 5, and you'll know what I mean if you come and fly it, is there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Difficulty, like I said, it's, as a layman returning after 3 months or so, I'm struggling just to fly and land, but once you practice it, it's not that hard, and again, we've agreed 3.5 and 3 out of 5 respectively. And the all-important X factor, or fun factor as I like to say, like a Huey, may not be the most potent. Again, you're not going to be taking any tanks out with a Huey, but you'll have a lot of fun, and you'll get a lot of money's worth. Everyone who buys the Huey gets a lot of money's worth, and that's why one of the reasons I recommend it. This is another one of those choppers. Again, you're not going to blow the world up, but you will have fun. Once you've mastered the intricacies of handling it and landing it and stuff like that, engine management, you will guarantee have a lot of fun on it. It just takes a little bit of time to get the flying in order. Any other summary from RC?
Nope, I agree with you.
Hope you enjoyed it. Go and buy it, and I'll see you later.